I went from waking life, falling asleep, to a lucid dream without losing consciousness. There was a part of me that was worried that all of this amazingness was just part of a dream. So I had quite a few meaningful lucid dreams during the cohort, but the one that comes to mind was one where I became lucid in the middle of dreaming about the instructor, Anthony, giving us a lesson on lucid dreaming. So it was very meta in that sense. And the reason why it was one of the most meaningful ones is not because it was very flashy or fantastical, but because it felt like a laboratory. So I became lucid, and Anthony was there teaching a few of us how to be lucid in the dream. So I experimented with flying in different ways and different techniques of flying and seeing which one would get the most speed or momentum. And also realizing, for example, that there were a couple of times where I tried to do something that defies the laws of physics and it wouldn't work. And I was like, why? Why is this happening? I'm in a dream. It should be easy to do it. And Anthony in the dream was saying, well, sometimes our brain still imposes the same laws of physics that we're expected to find in the real world. And so you have to make an effort or flex the muscle of removing those expectations. So physics in the dream behave however you want them to behave. And so that was a very interesting process of suspended disbelief almost, where I realized how much in my waking life, my brain is just constantly expecting things to happen. And so it was a very interesting process to let go of all those expectations and seeing what happened in the dream. My first lucid dream was quite intense. I was driving back home from one of the lessons and I was listening to this audiobook that is called Seth Speaks. And so when I got home, I was thinking like, wouldn't it be cool if in a lucid dream I could talk to entities like this, right? Like explore what's possible in terms of communicating with other layers of reality. And so that night, when I set my intention to become lucid, I said, tonight I will realize I'm dreaming. And when I do, I'm going to call on Seth and speak with him. And to my surprise, not only I became immediately lucid, which I did not expect at all because it was the first day of the program, but also as I became lucid, Seth appeared. And it was a huge lesson because I was completely unprepared for that. And that taught me how not really seriously I was taking my intention. I was like, yeah, I will realize I'm dreaming and then I will do all these things, but I wasn't actually believing it. So I wasn't prepared for it. And when it happened, it was a little bit of a shock. That was a huge lesson to learn at the beginning of the cohort. So every night I would be super prepared for every eventuality that could happen in the dream world. So I was already familiar with lucid dreaming before I went through the program. I had had a couple of accidental lucid dreams and I knew of the concept, but I was not aware of all the things that you can use it for. And after going through the program, I have a much more intentional practice around it. And so when I do become lucid, I'm like, okay, we can do all these things. We can, yes, we can have fun and fly and do fun things, but we can also explore some of our subconscious patterns and we can also improve or work on some fears that you have on waking life, or we can, just practice other states of consciousness. And so the scope of what's possible in a lucid dream has opened up for me after the program. And that makes me way more excited to actually apply myself to have more lucid dreams. So it's presence and awareness, right? When you are used to tracking your surroundings, to see if you're dreaming or not and to realize if there's anything out of the ordinary that could clue you in to the fact that you're dreaming, you become much more aware of what's happening around you in waking life and you notice patterns much more intentionally and consciously. For example, now when something unexpected happens, like a friend from childhood, calls me up or whatever, I do a reality check. I'm like, oh, wait, something out of the ordinary happened. And that makes me be much more aware of what's happening in my waking life. It's also, for me, one of the surprising things has been it's created a layer of abstraction or separation from my waking life where I'm no longer just going through the motions, but kind of observing myself go through waking life, sort of a similar process that happens when you're meditating. And I think the reason is because when you become lucid in a lucid dream, there is kind of a layer of you're deciding what happens in your story. So the world around you becomes much more malleable. And so I think that transfers to the waking life where you feel a bit more empowered and a bit more of an observer of what's happening in your life versus just kind of getting lost in life itself. So there was a surprising realization for me that happened somewhere in the middle of the program where I realized that I had an internal fear of realizing that I was dreaming. So this happened during one of my reality checks where I had a moment of like, oh, wait, is this a dream? And so I did a couple of reality checks and it was reality. And I found myself being relieved. And I caught on that and I was like, wait, why am I relieved? Am I fearful of this not being real, of actually being asleep? And that led me through a beautiful process of realizing that, well, number one, I really love my life. And so there was a part of me that was worried that all of this amazingness was just part of a dream. And so that fear of reality not being real was actually transferring to my dream state as well. So that was kind of one of the unlocks of like, oh, maybe that fear is preventing me from having more lucid dreams because even in a dream state, I am afraid that this is a dream. So I don't check, right? And I don't become lucid. And this really helped me identify that part of myself and work on it and resolve it, which was very meaningful to me. So there was one moment where I had a realization, and this is kind of hard to explain, but I had a realization that the lucid dreaming state was the same mental shape as meditation. So it was the complete letting go of grasping to reality, of grasping to expectations, of grasping to what we think life should be, and just getting into this state of observing and flow and letting things happen as they may, and just fully trusting that they're going to happen as they're supposed to happen. And I had one experience where I went from waking life, falling asleep, to a lucid dream without losing consciousness. So without falling asleep and then waking up in the dream, it was just all one experience. And I arrived to that through meditation. So being in a state of meditation while falling asleep and then immediately noticing my body falling asleep, but my mind was still active within the dream. And that has served me as well as a blueprint to create this altered states of consciousness within my waking life or meditation.